Good morning and welcome to Richard Raw's Daily Meditation from the Centre for Action and Contemplation. The theme for this week is Contemplation and Racism, and the title of the contribution for today, Wednesday, June the 10th, 2020, is Unlearning Racism. And this is how Richard Raw begins. Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove is an author, minister, and contemplative activist. The interview with the Centre for Action and Contemplation's Daily Meditations editor, Mark Longhurst, which we have excerpted here, was published in 2018, but his reflections on freedom from what he calls slaveholder religion, contemplation, and action are especially relevant today. And he writes, "My journey toward freedom from slaveholder religion has been one of unlearning a hyper-individualized piety. I've had to learn that this is a spiritual version of the myth of the self-made man or woman that social systems that privilege whiteness created." And then Richard Raw says, Jonathan shares about his prayer practices and how the practice of confessing sin helps him dwell in solidarity with the marginalized. And then Mark Longhurst continues, and he says, "We need relationships of accountability, spaces where we listen to black and brown folks say what actions are hurting them and their communities. Given the power imbalances in our society, confession for white folks really has to be something of a reverse confessional. It's not the job of people who've suffered generational injustice to sit and listen to us. Now we've got to position ourselves to sit and listen to them, then talk to one another about how we can unlearn implicit bias, leverage social privilege for the common good, and follow the leadership of impacted people working for systemic justice. The daily practice of confession is a radical act of listening." And then Richard Raw interjects, "Wilson Hartgrove finds that communal spirituality and action for justice have helped liberate him from the individualistic self-made myth of systemic whiteness." He then goes on, "The antidote to hyper-individualized spirituality is in many ways the communal contemplative practices of black-led freedom movement in America. I'm thinking about the prayer practices of song and shout in Pentecostal churches, of call and response in Black Baptist preaching. There's a mantra-like repetition in that experience of worship that is every bit as much contemplation as you find sitting in silence. In fact, it is a silence, a still point of complete simplicity that's beyond words. For me, I find silence in the praise and testimony service at the St. John Baptist Church, and I find it singing and marching in the streets with the Poor People's Campaign." And then Richard Raw interjects again, "At the same time, Jonathan cherishes stillness, embodying a true centering down, in the words of Howard Thurman, that can take place just about anywhere." And so Jonathan continues, "The silence of the early morning is why I wake early. I can't be myself without it. But as I grow in the life of faith, I feel more and more the connection between that silence and the silence at the centre of a morning mother's cry, the silence of the downbeat between the claps of a freedom song. There is a still point in the turning world, and we practice contemplation as we ground ourselves in that place, not apart from the action, but in the centre of it." Here ends the meditation for today, and again, can I encourage you, if you haven't done so, to sign up for these daily meditations by going to the Centre for Action and Contemplation website, which you can very easily access by Googling Centre for Action and Contemplation and Richard Raw.